Hi, I'm Phil Anderson and welcome to my channel. I've been a property investor now for over 30 years and I've watched investors continue to make the same common investment mistakes. There's so many dirty tricks in the real estate industry and it's all caught up in a whole heap of sales hype. I want to cut through that sales hype and help investors avoid the common mistakes. I hope you enjoy the following content, but please remember to like and subscribe.
G'day listeners and viewers across the country and welcome to another episode of Street Smart Property Investing, where we, as always, have a look behind the headlines, see what's going on the streets across Australia's property markets. But today, and for the next few episodes, we want to map out the whole investor experience. We've been talking behind the scenes, and what we've noticed is that so many investors are racing into the market. The markets are so damn hot right now. A lot of investors are just spilling into the market and throwing a bit of caution to the wind, really, when it comes down to their strategies. Now, each week I am joined by two of the most trusted people in the real estate industry from very different perspectives. Mr. Gordon Ruddy, one of the most known, loved and trusted property investment advisors, and Mr. Trent Durrington, one of the most experienced and I think one of the most I think underestimated resources when it comes to property investing, which is about buying the right property when it comes to the development, the developer, the building quality, all of that acquisition stuff that a lot of investors don't even understand. This gentleman is full of a truckload of knowledge. So I'm really grateful to have you guys here today.
Good to be here, mate.
Good on you.
Yeah.
So let's touch on this. Now, we decided that we're going to map out a 5-part series, right? A 5-part stepping stone series. So for the investors that are listening at the moment and they're thinking about buying in 2021, I think this is going to be gold. I think this is going to be a great, stepping stone content, sort of rollout of that investment journey. And today we're going to do part 1, right? Now we're going to start right from the start of the journey. Now, two very different perspectives. So I'm going to throw around a few questions, just to get your perspectives on things. But Trent, from your side of things first, mate, one of the big things when it comes to the start of an investment journey is, in the property space, there are so many different ways, so many different strategies that property investors can come in. It's not one conversation, right? Commercial properties, industrial properties, holiday let properties, renovations, developments, etc., etc., etc. Let's talk a little bit about that, mate, because you've seen so much, you've been involved in so much, and you've seen so many tragic mistakes. Let's just touch on that when it comes to the start of your investment journey and making a good choice.
Yeah, well, it's really understanding your position where you're at in your potential at the start of the journey, but where you're at in your life. Are you married with a couple of kids, busy lifestyle, 2 working parents, running kids to school, then sports. Where I'm getting at is that there's no hours left in the week to really jump in and spend a whole heap of research and due diligence around buying an investment property. So are you that type of person? Are you someone that's got a very high net wealth and is looking to diversify into potentially commercial or, so there's a lot of different layers there, but I guess that's probably the first thing. What sort of time do I have to make the right investment?
Interesting you touch on that, because one of the things that happens as well in Australia is obviously this romantic idea that you're going to get into property investing and potentially that's also going to involve this renovation approach. We've seen the Block and all these other shows on TV that have made it all seem so romantic, the idea of what the husband and wife linking arms and painting houses and doing all these cosmetic things, but we've seen that turn into tragedy as well. Yeah,
well, it's a certain, I can't imagine unless it's a couple that are 100% committed to do that full time. That's for the average mum or dad, unless they're happy to sort of live in a dwelling that's half built and construction going on. And I know myself, I'm not comfortable with that. In my street, I've had a family couple, that's their business, is renovating, but it's a full-time business, and it's got its own challenges because you've got to be looking 2 and 3 properties ahead. You've got to be holding, okay, what's our next property to renovate? So there's finance challenges. there's the market that's moving pretty quick. Okay, are they buying? There's lots of different layers to that.
I think there's plenty of layers, because even if they don't have to live in the house, if they're just buying a property to renovate and they're going to just do it in their spare time, who has the spare time for a starter? Most people don't. Most relationships also don't handle the pressure of that very well. It's not just the time problems, the money issues, and the decision-making process, and we've seen so many different, unfortunately, so many relationships that have spiraled into problems because of, financial pressure and obviously projects taking much longer than expected, and financially it not turning out to be the result they hoped it would be. I think it's a bit of a slippery slope, unfortunately.
Yeah. Look, I'm sure it works for the some of the rare couples out there, but for our clients, we're trying to find, coming back to your term, the lazy investor, like yourself, you want to purchase and
mate, I don't mind calling myself the lazy investor. You're not supposed to.
Well, it's just buying.
But it's true.
Buying,
it is true. Yeah, look, mate, I'm a big fan of, when my interpretation of property investing, and I know this is something Gordy and I have shared for 30 years, is the property. As we say, Gordy, this is the vehicle, right? We all know that this is the vehicle to create wealth. It isn't. We're not looking for another job. We're not looking for. We're not looking for a project. We're not looking for a second job. We're looking for a vehicle to create wealth, and this is what it's all about. Let's just touch on that for a second, Gordy.
Yeah, first of all, I love where Trent started. I think with anything in life, the first thing we've got to know is, where are we today? Mm-hmm. Don't make it better than it is. Don't make it worse than it is. Understand where we are. Get then a picture, a vision of where we want to go. And then we've got to make it that way. Mm-hmm. That's what we've got to do. And property, we can do that with. There's strategies that we can implement. We've got to understand what kind of people we are. And, I guess you and I look at it from our perspective. But, I really think from a property investment point of view, exactly what you just said, the property's got to do the work for you. We don't, with property, if you spend the time up front and do the homework, or get a team around to help you do that homework, then the property does the work for you. You don't have to get up every morning and stir the property up. We don't need to encourage it to work harder. It just goes to work every day. We can, property is something where, it works while we're sleeping. Mm-hmm. It works while we're having fun. Mm-hmm. It does the stuff. It's not an employee that you need to motivate. Mm-hmm. It does what it does.
Look, the thing is, guys, if you look at the property market, and I agree, guys, this is one of those things where we've got to help the investor understand that it's very important to stop at the beginning of this thing, understand what our skills are, understand what we're trying to achieve, understand what our financial position is, because it's those elements. Once we really think about where we're at today and also what we'd like to achieve, like, how long is it until you want to achieve a certain goal? If it's if it's an aspirational thing towards, I want a certain amount of income in a certain time frame, I want to retire in 12 years or whatever that may be, then obviously your portfolio should be just a mechanism to get you towards that goal. And I had an observation. I was talking to a couple last week, and I had an observation that as I was addressing, they were telling me about their situation, what they're trying to achieve. And I said, well, I kind of look at it like I'm walking into the pantry and I'm looking at all the ingredients that are on the shelf, and I'm thinking, what would I make with this? What would I do with this, right? And some people would walk in and go, there's not the ingredients there needed to make a certain thing that they've got in mind. And I mean, a person that's thinking, I want to buy a certain property, what I see is everyone's got an opportunity to use what it is they have in their life, how much tax they're paying, how much super they've got, these different aspects of their life. And you just got to come up with, well, rather than thinking that you want to buy a property in a certain postcode at a certain price point, that may not be the right thing for you, right? Once you know your ingredients, once you know what your current situation is, what you've got to work with, your budget, the tax amount, your super balance, etc., you're much better off then coming back and going, now this is the recipe, this is the strategy. You've got skills or you don't have skills, you've got time or you don't have time, you've got a big budget, you don't have a big budget, you're paying a lot of tax, you're not paying a lot of tax, whatever those things are, to end up matching that property to suit the person. But in the whole property investment space, Trent, we're now starting to see people that are in great positions. Like, well, I've never seen so many wealthy people come out of the woodwork in recent months as we're seeing it. At the moment, it's crazy. But then they're also saying they're going to take on their first development. I'm going to do a development. I'm going to buy this block of land now. That's always something that scares you, mate, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I've had a couple of conversations with those clients, and as long as they're going in eyes wide open, so there's a whole heap of range of risks and time associated with going into even small developments. Have the same ingredients as a large development, and can mean. Whether it's 5 lots versus 100 lots, you've still got the same consultants and same trades, and so it can be as challenging.
Mate, I kind of liken it to, and you're probably the better one to even throw this kind of metaphor at, but it's like running a marathon, right? Never done it before. Going to get off the couch, going to jump up, going to take on a damn challenge. You go, bloody hell, you should do some training first. You should get a coach. You should get a team around you. You should really, respect what you're about to jump into, because doing a damn development, even if it's only a little set of 4 townhouses, my gosh, that can burn some cash at a quick rate of not. And we've seen people go out and grab sites in the last few weeks, show you the site, and you've gone, oh my gosh, does he realise that he's not going to get that amount on that site? He's got this issue, he's got that issue. This is the reason why that block of land is still available, or that development site's still available. Anyone with any knowledge wouldn't have purchased that site, It's crazy, right? They don't respect it. No. It's just unfortunate.
No, that's right. But some people get set in their ways, and they want to learn by their mistakes, and so be it.
Or they don't know. They're yet to realise they're going to make the mistakes. They just see another block down the street and say, well, that one got 4 on. This one must be able to get 4 on. It looks exactly the same to the untrained eye, right?
Yeah. Just touch on, mate, just your point there you made about the property investing, romantic. Can be a romantic thought. The investors that want to invest in their own backyard, if they're owning a $1.5 million house and they've got 300,000 or 400,000 in equity, and they want to invest in their own backyard and buy another $1.5 million house, in this market, it's the owner occupiers driving this
absolutely
this boom, right? So, in that sort of scenario, the numbers just don't work.
It's a different set of rules, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to, the owner occupiers, it's a totally different set of rules. The house is specific to their needs, specific to what makes their family function and their hearts sing. It's a whole range of emotional elements, right?
Well, you're competing as an investor against an emotional buyer. The emotional buyer is always going to win. If that's an owner-occupier that's got young kids and its location to quality private schools, whatever that might mean, as an investor, you're not going to compete against them, and it's silly. Your money's not going to work anywhere near as well. I guess I'm just raising that because there's got to be a strategy about your property investing,
That's important, mate, because I tell you, we had that conversation last week as well, where one of the gentlemen we're talking to, who's a very knowledgeable gentleman in the retail space, he's a quality real estate agent, the gentleman I'm thinking of, and he was talking about the owner-occupied space. He was talking about the the focus that we have on brand new properties and why we have so much focus on it. Of course, once he realised that that's what the government's now given all the incentives towards. They changed the negative gearing laws in 2019, and now there's a massive gap between whether you buy an existing property or a brand new property, and it's much more in favour of a brand new property enjoying all of the tax benefits. But also in a market like we're seeing today, where the homeowners are so competitive and they're pushing to buy property and they're driving these prices up through emotional buying, in the example of a existing property up against those emotional buyers, the rules go out the window. when we're doing a new property, when you're assessing a new estate, a new lot of land, a new build package, etc., there's no emotion. It's all per square metre rates. It's all analysed by what's the land worth per square metre, the build per square metre, what's the inclusions at that level, etc. It's a very analytical approach as opposed to a emotional approach.
Yeah, that's right. And you've got to remember as an investor, although you may not choose to live in your investment, there's lots and lots of families that it suits.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah,
So,
it can flip over to become an emotional thing. It can flip over. A great investment property can get the benefits of buying it via a valuation-driven approach. And then after, when you put it back into the market, then you can let those emotional buyers determine what price that they would be prepared to pay for it,
Yeah.
But that's not how you buy.
Yeah, no, that's right, mate.
Not as an investor.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, and Gordy, let's talk a little bit about, from the approach of, okay, so if an investor was to go, I want to get into the market, that I would say, well, you've got to be in a brand new, not a, if they go, say this is if they're going to start building a portfolio. They'd want to get all the best of the Australian laws, the negative gearing laws, so they'd be at a brand new property. They'd be assessing it unemotionally. They wouldn't be going through this emotional arm wrestle with home buyers. They'd be trying to stay in an analytical approach. They'd be using a team to help them understand the right price per square metre for the block of land, the right value on that lot of land, if you can get the damn thing at the moment. But, that's part of needing a team. Then the right build package with the right quality build, etc. They'd end up with that right property that is hopefully something that they can do, and I would suggest it's something that they can have turnkeyed. So if they're busy, they don't have to be distracted, right? They don't have to have any of that distraction. And it's something that becomes a vehicle to create wealth rather than creates another job for themselves. So, in the process of understanding that would be the right, product, to be trying to tap into, you would be working with that person to understand, well, okay, what is their... how do you get financially ready? What's the preparation that you will be working with a client to help them understand, more details about what to target?
Well, that's the starting point. What we mentioned at the beginning is to understand exactly where you are today. And when we say that, we talk about financially. So we would have, our clients have a chat to a finance expert. Mm-hmm. They would find out, everything about that person, work out, what their borrowing capacity would be. Mm-hmm. And once we know what their borrowing capacity is, then we'd have a look at, unemotionally, what opportunities are out there, and then find a square peg for a square hole. We'd work out, part of the things that an investor can get emotional about is, well, I don't want to be tipping in $100 a week to own an investment property. My feeling is I really want something that's either cash flow neutral or it's going to be paying me X amount of dollars a week. That's really what I want to do. I want to add to my lifestyle, and I want to be emotional about having a better life, not having a life that's going to, or adding something to my life that's going to take away the lifestyle. Mm-hmm. I want to add something that's going to immediately make my life better.
You talk about, before you jump into that next section, you talk about the finance. You talk about getting a finance expert. I think most investors now realise that if they're dealing with one bank, if they're just dealing with a bank in a traditional sense, and this is where we all come from. If you go back 20 years ago, we all, we had our bank manager and we all were faithful to a bank, and predominantly we may still have a bank at the core of our world, but we also realise that there's a real function for a good quality broker as a property investor, the ability for them to shop around and match products to suit different strategies.
It's so important. Banks, the various banks, they change their policies almost, I'd like to say daily, but sometimes weekly. They change their policy. So you really need to have somebody that's up to date with each one of those lending institutions to understand who's best going to suit you, because you might go to one lending institution and they pigeonhole you and, almost tie your hands. You can't do anything. Mm-hmm. Whereas with another lending institution, it opens up a world of opportunities for you. So it's so important to have someone who's got their finger on the pulse of what those current policies are for each institution.
And you talk about that changing their policies or changing their appetite. And this can happen because we know that people can be with a certain bank, they can be working through a process, may even take months to work towards being what we would call buyer ready. Then as they get towards that, the finish line, the bank at that time may decide, well, we're going to pull back a bit. We're not going to lend as much money to, that particular section of the market, whether it's that sort of that region, that product type, or just the investors in general. And all of a sudden, the investor can get a bit disillusioned because all of a sudden they're not qualifying for a loan or they're not able to get a loan. That has little to do with the investor at times and has much more to do with the internal policy of the bank.
Almost has nothing to do with the investor. It's all to do with, as you say, the bank at the time, what their appetite is for certain areas, certain product types. And it doesn't mean there's any issues with the area or the product type. It's just that particular bank might have done too much. And their policy says, well, we'll only have, whatever it is, might have 70%, of the allocated funds in that area or in that particular product type. So it's very rarely, the investor that is the issue.
One of the ones that comes to mind for me straight away is self-managed super fund lending, because for me personally, it's one of my favourite. No, it's my favourite. It's my favourite investment vehicle. I love it. I love the idea of leveraging money inside of a super fund. It's a conservative approach. It's a very low risk and very conservative investment strategy. But what I love most about it is it cocoons away wealth. And for many Australians, it helps them cocoon away wealth they can't get access to. And then when they can get access to it, the wealth that it can create over a period of 15 years or so, I know it's life changing for everyone I see go through this. And those properties that they now own inside their super fund, we've seen the dynamics of what can happen. It's very powerful. But those properties, when they sell them, they don't pay any capital gains tax. It's 100% their money to keep when they're in retirement mode. But unfortunately, people can get excited about the idea of testing and understanding that more and have a talk to their bank manager, and their bank manager can make them feel like it's not a good idea and it's not a safe strategy and it's not something they would recommend. But the real reason is the bank doesn't offer a product for that. So this is why you need a broker. You need a broker that will help you understand what is the best match for you, for each product, each strategy inside of your inside of your portfolio as you build it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because, the big four at the moment aren't really interested in it. But speaking to, the brokers that we're using, there's other lenders now that are coming in, they see the opportunity. They see that it's a safe environment for them to lend money into because, it really doesn't, if the investor is, gainfully employed and they've got their contributions going in, the rents that they receive, they go, for them it's also, as you said, it's so safe. I think we're still a bit boggled why, some of the big banks who were so excited about it at the beginning don't want to be a part of it now because it's been one of the least
it's a very conservative. It's a very conservative,
So I think it's exciting that there are other lenders out there now that are seeing the value in it and offering great interest rates too, like 1% less than what the big banks were offering. So it's a great opportunity for investors to use their self-managed super fund and really leverage it.
So what we're talking about here is really understanding, what would be the right properties for you as far as the choosing if you don't have skills and you don't have time to make sure they are properties that are going to go to work for you rather than you need to work for them. Make sure that you've got good finance, understanding, make sure you've got good support, make sure that you're starting to match up, properties of the right property values, but also by using a service like yourself, which I'd highly recommend. I don't understand why people wouldn't build a team around them right from the start, understand what's possible, the leverage you can get by having a great coach. Like I said, it's a marathon or it's a, whatever sporting arena you're stepping into, you're going to get a level of coaching or personal training or something to help you understand how to avoid most of the mistakes. And that's what property investing kind of has lacked in the past, but now, property investment advisors and, a team of people around you is an absolute, necessity, right, in today's market. But understanding those elements and getting your strategy right, getting your finance right, knowing what you're going after, knowing the importance of yield so that when you get to the end and you've got this portfolio, it's not just an orchard of fruit trees that are bearing low amounts of fruit. You've got the most fruitful property portfolio as well. And that's starting to shape up this direction moving ahead. But there's one really important point, and one really important point I would have at the moment is the thing that I think is making people push faster than getting that game plan first is a fear of missing out, right? This fear that the Australian property market is in such a boom phase, and it's a broad-based boom. But we know this, mate. We've seen this so many times before. We've seen, not this sort of boom, but we've seen booms, right? And typically we are watching a great market every month of every year. We're watching a market that's performing really well that we're excited about. We've never seen so many that are booming or running at the same time. But what would you say about that to the listener, mate?
Yeah, well, don't get caught up in that media hype. Still have FOMO, fear of missing out, because...
Well, you got to at the moment, because this is the window. I've never seen a window like it.
It is. But I guess as a bit of a summary of this 5-part series, for me, it's whenever we're ready as an investor, meaning we've got the ability to borrow money and leverage and buy a property, we should be buying, regardless of the market or where the market is. With that being said, the hype that some of the media is communicating at the moment, granted, it can sometimes relate to some of those upper end markets like a Bondi or inner city type suburbs that are running real red hot.
Sure.
And yes, all markets are running hot, but there's certain strategic investment areas that we target that have got long way to go. So,
well, the listeners are listening. That obviously we're all affected by the headlines. We're all affected by the big news stories. You get a month where a market like Sydney has this crazy level of growth. This phenomenal growth in one particular month, and the whole market sees headlines. We're sort of flooded with headlines, but then in proportion to the last 12 months, that particular story isn't that strong compared to what we've seen in the regionals. The Sydney market and the Melbourne market, I think, are markets that potentially, could have months ahead where we see more listings come on, the dynamics change in the market. And then we could also be susceptible to negative headlines. There could be negative headlines that come up where, if they can use an example of a boom month, they can also use an example of a not so great market month where the correction happens and the market goes back 4%. And of course then, the end of the world, right? This cliff, right? There's a cliff, and then the investors start freaking out when really we're talking about a market rather than all the markets.
Yeah.
And that's a danger.
Yeah, it is. And remember, some investors don't really understand what I call the greenfield space, a new master plan community that's being built or established in the outer suburbs. Haven't been privy to understand that market. But those markets continue to grow and new master plan communities pop up, infilled greenfield estates pop up. There's always good investment opportunities in quality owner-occupier areas which just tick all the boxes around the numbers supporting that investment.
Yeah, mate. I think there's also, the chance that for a lot of investors chasing markets, and when they hear that greenfield conversation, it's you got an unfair advantage because you know how to assess those markets and know that they're part of the growth corridor. This growth corridor where population is rolling and we can get caught up in that growth. Whereas other investors can go to a greenfield market that, sure, there's land available and it's a greenfield development, but we know the population isn't going to flow there quick enough, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a hard thing to navigate, and it brings me back to, I think, having a team right from the start. You know, I mean, who have you got around you? You know, what coaching, what's support, what team have you got around you as an investor? You need great bankers. You need somebody that understands how to run the numbers and help you understand how to, you know, minimise your tax, leverage your super, maximise your strategy. This is very much about strategy. And I think people are surprised when they really have a look at, I think all three of us, but I'll speak for myself. We're quite low risk investors. You know, we don't need to dial the risk up. You can just through knowledge and through understanding, you know, all the parts of that jigsaw puzzle, all that recipe for success. You don't need to dial the risk up. You just need to be able to leverage every time you can, buy as quick as you can when you can, right? Yeah. Following a great strategy, knowing the numbers, and be a lazy investor if you choose to, because that's what I've chosen to do for the last 30 years. The only time I've stuffed it up was when I decided to go, I thought I had the Midas touch. I might do a little development here. I might do this commercial side. I might do this, or renoing. Oh my gosh. I quickly learnt that's not for me. I got to just pull back. Yeah. I'm an investor. I've got to let the properties do the work.
That's right. And for our existing clients or, viewers out there, the people with the existing properties, they've got to keep the finger on the pulse of what equity is being built in their portfolio right now. Yeah. And it's easy to pick up the phone and get a strategist. Okay, can you do an overview of my portfolio? Let's see if we've got some cash there where I can go again.
Absolutely.
Because it's changing monthly right now.
Mm-hmm. We're seeing it firsthand. Yeah. We're seeing people that are getting a shock when they come back and they start talking to us and we go, you could do this, you could do that, you could add this, you could do that. They go, what? This is great, right? And when they're doing it, as you know, Gordy, they're doing it, you're showing them their strategies and it's cash flow positive from day one based on 100% of the finance, all of the holding costs, everything, and it's still cash flow positive. It's just a freaky moment in time.
And it's a good time to sort of illustrate, Gordy, I'm sure you probably do this with the end in mind of showing what a portfolio looks like with one or two extra properties in it, at the end of a 20-year run, how healthier that portfolio looks.
Absolutely. A thing that just came to my mind then is the other side we see is also people that are going, I've got to do something. So they think, I'll buy myself a business. How many don't laugh, but we've seen it. Oh,
unfortunately, we have seen it.
Yeah, and they go out and they'll buy a franchise, and it turns into just heartache and just it's sad.
Well, things happen, mate. You go from being a wage earner to being self-employed. All of a sudden, you can't get a loan.
But all you're doing is
all these things just change. Everything changes.
But you're buying a job basically when they do that. So I you talk to someone who's going into business. They talk to any business coach. What's the first thing a business coach wants to? Where do they want to take them? To a point where they're not working in the business anymore, but they can work on the business. And property investment is no different. We don't want to buy a property that's going to create work for us. We want to be in position, work on it. Just like Trent said, how we work on our property portfolio is just understanding where it might be at any point in time. Is there equity now that I can tap into that and increase it? But it's not something that, should take up any more time than, my statement's just come in from the property manager. Let's have a look. Yep, everything's cool. Flick it onto the bookkeeper or the accountant. That's how much work you should do in it. The rest of it is just working on it and going, well, when's my next opportunity to add a property?
And be excited about that.
Yeah, be excited. That doesn't become a chore. It should be an exciting time.
All right. Well, look, guys, we did decide we're going to map out 5 steps to this process. We want to start the conversation today based on step 1. Stop and just consider, why do you want to invest? Why do you want to invest? Don't just jump in and buy. We know we've got to get into the market quickly because this is like a moment in time that we shouldn't underestimate. We certainly can't sit on our hands, but we should be seeking advice. We should be getting a team around us. We should know what we can afford to buy. We should know what's the best strategy for us personally. What does the cash flow look like? What would that property type look like? So we get a feel. And I think all paths will lead to most investors purchasing a brand new property somewhere probably between, I don't know, high 300s, let's call it $400,000, up to about probably 700, I would say, is the sweet spot. Somewhere between 400 and 700,000. And instead of getting 2%, 2.5%, 3% yield like we see so often in many portfolios in Sydney and Melbourne, double that, at least 4.5%, but maybe even up to 6%. And we're now starting to see some property types that we're getting 8% yield in the residential space, which is the lowest risk profile property type you can buy. The bank will lend the most money on residential. It's the lowest risk property type we can see. And I think for an investor just to understand how does that all work for them, and is this the top, unless, like I said, they've got some particular set of skills where they could be doing developments and so forth, I think most investors that are time poor and whatever will just end up back at buying a brand new property somewhere in that price range and having a team around them to help them understand the numbers and what's the right fit for their portfolio. But that would be step number one. Understanding, like I said, what they're trying to achieve, the importance of all of those elements, etc., etc. The next step in the process, once you understand that, you've got your strategy, your price point, etc., you've got your team pulled together, is where to buy. So when we come back, I think what we will do is we'll start moving through from why do you want to invest to where do you want to invest. We'll look at those locations, what makes a great location. In step 3, we'll start talking about what would you, purchase in those markets. Like find the right location. What would be the property type, the best property type to buy in that location? Then in step number 4, we'll talk about how do we control that process? How do we make sure that it doesn't spiral out of control? How do we make sure that we control the contract, the conditions around purchasing that property? And then step number 5 will help people understand how to be the laziest possible investor, be a landlord that can sit back, relax, knowing that everything's going to run smooth, and know what those trigger points are when you should come back and have a look at your portfolio and load back up again.
Yep.
Thanks for joining me, boys.
Good on you.
Good on you, guys.
Gordo, nice work.
Good on you.
Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe, and also feel free to leave me a question. I look forward to helping as many property investors as possible. Take care, and we'll talk soon.